And now from the campus of Clemson University in South Carolina, Senator Lindsey Graham. Senator Graham, I want to start with this, what Senator Reid just said. He suggested, I asked him, I said, are Speaker Boehner and the mainstream Republicans, the people who have been around here a while, just afraid of the Tea Party? And he said, well, that's a pretty good choice of words. Are you afraid of the Tea Party?
No, I think they're an important part of the Republican coalition, but our Democratic friends should be afraid of the public. How did you lose the House in such overwhelming numbers? How did you lose so many Senate seats? It was about spending, the size and scope of government, rejection of Obamacare. So our friends in the House, Speaker Boehner, who replaced Speaker Pelosi, is doing what the American people want in the last election, trying to reduce the size and scope of the government, which is a goal shared by the Tea Party. But you can't account for the last election based on a narrow view of America. Americans as a whole are very upset about the size and scope of the federal government. We're trying to reduce spending, and our Democratic friends are hanging on to old ideas that every time you try to reduce spending, you're being cruel and mean. What's cruel and mean is to pass this debt on to future generations.
Senator, let me ask you the same question I asked Senator Reid, because I know you're heavily involved in some of these negotiations. Do you think next Sunday we're going to talk about the government being shut down, or will you have found some sort of a way to get together?
I think we'll get together. I think there are enough red state Democrats who do not want to take this fight any further. They do want to be seen as reducing spending. We're talking about 12% of the budget. Harry's right about that. The 2012 budget on the Republican side will be talking about reducing the size of government by trillions, not just billions. But I think we'll find consensus. We've already reduced spending by $10 billion. The two CRs that we passed cut spending more than any Congress in the history of America in terms of rescission. So I think we'll find common ground. There are enough Democrats out there who understand they need to be on the right side of reducing the federal government, and we'll find a number that we all can agree on.
I want to get to this Afghanistan thing. General Petraeus today condemned the actions of this Florida preacher who burned the Koran. You heard what Senator Reid said.
Yeah.
Is there anything that actually can be done along this line?
You know, I wish we could find some way to hold people accountable. Free speech is a great idea, but we're in a war. During World War II, you had limits on what you could say if it would inspire the enemy. So burning a Quran is a terrible thing, but it doesn't justify killing someone. Burning a Bible would be a terrible thing, but it wouldn't justify a murder. But having said that, anytime we can push back here in America against actions like this that put our troops at risk, we ought to do it. So I look forward to working with Senator Kerry and Reid and others to condemn this, condemn violence all over the world based in the name of religion. But General Petraeus understands better than anybody else in America what happens when something like this is done in our country. And he was right to condemn it, and I think Congress would be right to reinforce what General Petraeus said.
We saw the report from Liz Palmer, turmoil all across the Middle East this morning. Is it time to arm the rebels in Libya and go directly after Gaddafi?
Well, I think it's time to go directly after Gaddafi. If you had TOW missiles given to the rebels in Libya, they could fight the tanks in addition to air power. But this strategy that President Obama's come up with, I think, is not going to defeat a determined enemy. The question is Gaddafi determined? The strategy is confusing to the American people. Only 21% believe President Obama has a clear view of how to handle Libya. It's demoralizing to our allies, particularly people on the ground that we're trying to help. And I think it's encouraging to our enemies. So this strategy is going to lead to a stalemate, and we should be taking the fight to Tripoli. You don't need ground troops, but we should take the aerial campaign to Tripoli to go after Gaddafi's inner circle. They live like kings. Go after them, to go after their propaganda machine. The way to end this war is to have Gaddafi's inner circle to crack. The way to get his inner circle to crack is to go after them directly.
So you're calling, you say what we need to do is airstrikes on Gaddafi and his people.
Absolutely. I think he's an international war criminal. I don't believe he's a legitimate leader of the Libyan people. His inner circle is in a bit of disarray. They would be in more disarray if we took the fight to Tripoli. We are going to have a stalemate if we don't change our strategy. The strategy should be to help the rebels help themselves, provide arms when it makes sense, to take the best Air Force in the world and park it during this fight is outrageous. When we call for a no-fly zone, we didn't mean airplanes. So tomorrow, the American Air Force is out of this fight, and as much as I respect our NATO allies, you take a lot of capacity off the table by grounding our airplanes, and that's going to make this war go longer. I want it to end quickly with one goal in mind, replacing Gaddafi by something that will be better. And I'm confident that what you see in the Arab world, Bob, is a good thing if we manage it well. These people throughout the Arab world are saying enough to tyranny, enough to despots. We want a better future, a future that we can recognize and associate ourselves with.
Senator, you know, when a story like this happens, and we got two big stories now, the situation in Japan and the situation in Libya, it tends to just sort of overwhelm the rest of the news. And a lot of things that would be getting coverage don't get coverage. One of those is Iraq. I am told that you're concerned about what's happening in Iraq right now. Why so?
Well, I'm deeply concerned. We're inside the 10-yard line in terms of finishing the job in Iraq, but in 2011, all troops are supposed to leave Iraq, American troops. I do not believe the State Department can carry on their mission of helping the Iraqi government and people reconstitute their society to help them build a civil society without American forces there to provide security, air power, logistical support, the Iraqi army. This idea of being pushed that we'll have a State Department army, I will not vote for that. I will not support that. We need American troops in 2012, 10 to 15,000, left behind in Iraq to provide security to our people who are helping the Iraqi people maintain air superiority, to have an edge against Iran, and to make sure that the Iraqi army continues to develop.
You say a State Department army. You're going to have to explain that. What are you talking about? What are they planning here?
Well, here's the backup plan. If all military forces are withdrawn from Iraq in 2011, the State Department has come to the Congress and said, we're going to need over 50 MRAMs, these mine-resistant vehicles. We need a fleet of helicopters and thousands of private security guards to protect us as we go to the 4 consulates in Iraq to do our job to help the Iraqis build a civil society out of a dictatorship. I think that is a losing formula. I do not believe the State Department should have an army, that's not the way to provide security to our State Department, that if we're not smart enough to work with the Iraqis to have 10 to 15,000 American troops in Iraq in 2012, Iraq could go to hell. There are fights now between the Kurds and the Arabs.
I'm sorry, but I find this hard to believe. Are you talking about we're going to arm our diplomats and put them in these kind of vehicles that people are driving around in Iraq now?
You got it, Bob. We're going to have private security guards providing security. I think American soldiers and the Iraqi army should provide security. We're talking about a fleet of helicopters so they can get around to the 4 consulates spread throughout Iraq. We're talking about MRAMs, mine-resistant vehicles, bought by the State Department, a mini State Department army. We've never done that before. That will fail. I'm urging the Obama administration to work with the Maliki administration in Iraq to make sure that we have enough troops, 10 to 15,000, beginning 2012, to secure the gains we've achieved, to make sure Iran doesn't interfere with the Iraqi sovereignty, and to develop this country. We can't do it with a State Department army, and I will not support that. This is a defining moment in the future of Iraq, and the Obama administration has the wrong strategy in Libya, and in my view, they're going down the wrong road when it comes to Iraq.
Well, I find all of it hard to believe. We have about 20 seconds, Senator. I want to go back to make sure I understood what you said about Libya. You're ready to give missiles to the rebels there.
I think TOW missiles, I'm ready to look at arming them to help themselves. We need American air power back into the fight, and we need to take the fight to Tripoli. Go after his inner circle. That's the way to end this war decisively and quickly. The strategy we have is going to lead to a stalemate. It needs to change. Help the rebels. Take the fight to Tripoli. Get this thing over with. Gaddafi must go. It'd be a disaster to keep him in power.
All right. Well, you certainly made some news this morning, Senator. I'll give you that. Thank you so much for being with us, and I'll be back with a final word.